Since you've had a few hours now to consider what I was talking about, of a man's apparent individuality, his personality, and the parallel that I was trying to sketch real quickly for you of the legal fiction of the corporation, those of you who did ponder it, I'm going to try and stretch it in such a direction that perhaps it will become a little more meaningful. Another aspect that I just touched on when I was mentioning the springboard to start us off of life producing this corporation, and I referred to it in a way in which is referred to in law school as a legal fiction. And specifically, how this has an application is under certain conditions, which I'm not going into, it's not that important, but trust me, legally, technically, I guess you would think of it, under certain conditions, they will treat the corporation as almost as though it exists. And then under other conditions, which is the primary condition, but under other conditions, they treat it as though the corporation is indeed a legal fiction. Now, I was not unaware that many of you just sort of looked blank, and I was trying to discourage you then from getting involved with the apparent legalese. I just wanted you to try and see that there was a springboard, as always, that life has this information available. I'm still going to pursue that, but if it would help elucidate it all, perhaps more of you have read at least this much. You do know that still, as far as I am aware, in the realm of quantum mechanics, they treat light as being both wave and particle. Not only does it seem to manifest itself under different conditions, but simply for the sake of theory, for the sake of mathematical paradigms, they will treat it at times as though it were waves, and at other times as though it were a matter of particles. Now listen, trust me, if people as simplistic, as people as ordinary as quantum physicists can deal with that and say, well, all right, it can be both, and both of them are mutually exclusive in the same way that a thing either exists or it don't exist, right? So you can't say, well, a corporation's a legal fiction. That is, there is such a thing as General Motors because you can buy stock in it, it can go bankrupt, it can be sued, it can sue other people, and yet there is no such thing as General Motors. It is a convenient, this is not a legal word, it is a convenient fiction. Now consider the convenience of the fiction, of that and of being able to treat light under some conditions as though it is particles and under conditions as though light is waves. Consider this. Life will treat men, and so far as, remember where I started this, of considering men's so-called personality, their individuality, the operations of your nervous system up to the point that you've got a brain lighting up, turning through chemical processes, and you think, just in the ordinary sense. That is the basis of the idea of personality, individuality, and so on. On that basis, life treats man's apparent individuality not unlike at all that quantum theory, that quantum application toward light, toward what I mentioned to you of the legal fiction of the corporation. That is, life treats people, and life makes people treat each other at times as though individuality, free-willed individuality exists. And at other times, life treats men and makes men treat each other as though there is no such thing. Is that any better? Let's start with the latter in both aspects. All of you know by now that you and everyone else on occasions will treat other people as though they are responsible for what they're doing. That is, that individuality, responsibility, is simply a synonym for individuality in the city, that it exists. Why the hell did you back into my car? You blind? No matter what the man says. Well, There is no well. You don't back out of a parking place unless you look. I mean, it's almost fist time. You are responsible. At other times, people are not responsible. Particularly, rather than me making up examples about other people, let's take the easy, the obvious, the most workable. Is if you back into somebody's car, under most conditions, and forget these kind of high school or even college level psychological explanations of rationalization that we're all psychologically inclined to excuse ourselves. Forget that. That's childish babble. You had 2 or 3 decades to go through that before you got here. We are talking about, or I am talking about, the chemical, the electrical energy flowing through life and making men operate, and finally coming through man's nervous system up to here. You treat you under a myriad of conditions as though individuality, that is the responsibility that I am in some way a thinking, free-willed, sentient being, is an illusion. What happened was beyond my control. I may not have the inclination nor the ability to intellectually describe to myself or anyone else who's in charge or why I did this deed, but there is no doubt in your nervous system. Ordinary people would say there's no doubt that you feel, which is not it, but there's no doubt that you feel absolutely exonerated, but it's on this basis. That individuality in this case is a fiction. All right, now forget feel, forget thought. Think thought. Would you deliberately back into somebody's car coming out of a parking place? No. No. Under no condition would you deliberately. All right, are you so dumb? Are you so dumb? Well, first, is your eyesight so bad that you cannot see a car 3 feet behind you? No. Well, so what are the other possibilities? What else is there? You cannot logically explain, but there is no doubt that you have hit, in this case, the wave theory. It's a particle theory when somebody else backs into you. This is not childish psychology. It is particle theory when somebody else backs into you because you look at it. Now listen, both of these are true. That's why I'm saying it's not rationalization and forget psychological explanations. When somebody else backs into you in broad open daylight, the guy's got on his glasses, he's got his rear view mirror, you're 3 feet away, you're driving a red car, you're waiting to get in this other parking place next to him, he turns on his engine, you see that, you see the exhaust, and suddenly, as they say, almost in slow motion, you see that mother just back right into you, and his head's kind of cocked like he's looking up in the rear view mirror. That is the particle theory. That is, now from this position, how can you explain this? Is the man blind? You look at him, when you go up, he looks at you. He's got a newspaper laying down the dice like he was reading. As far as you can tell, the man can see. Then you look at him, do you recognize him? Is he somebody that you owe money to? Is he somebody that you have taken away 2 or 3 of his girlfriends before? Do you know the man? Is there any reason he would have deliberately backed into you? Well, no, I don't see any explanation. So how can you explain it? Well, I'm not sure I can, but I know this. There is no peripheral, there is no mechanical, there is no accidental explanation for somebody backing right into my car. That's what I was trying to convey a few minutes ago, my little scenario that's almost fist time, that there you stand. It's beyond explanation, and it's not my fault. It's his fault. It's the particle theory. But when you do it, you can take the same explanation, not rationalization. Are you blind? No. Do you recognize the guy? Do you have something, an unpaid debt? No. Some sort of retaliation against him? No. Did you just decide, well, I'm going to run into somebody? Well, certainly not. So what happened? Well, that's the wave theory. Likewise, when it gets down to it, there is no legitimate explanation other than this. There is this, that people do not normally enunciate in this way. But it's, I'm not responsible in some way. In this case, the whole idea of individuality is we're back to the legal fiction. I'm one of life's little small-time corporations. The owners, if we're going to have to put it some way, the owners of the corporation, the hidden owners, in some way brought this about. I did not. Another way of considering this that seemed to have drawn for many of you equally blank stares several hours ago, last time we met, was when I said this question was related to another historical one of whether the power of the crown or the throne was the power of the institution itself or of the individual. This has, if I can drag any of you over there again with better results, has the possibility of, in a meaningful manner, unfolding in a slightly different direction than corporations and accidents with your automobile. This has been a perennial discussion. In our part of the world, not having a crown or a throne is known as this. In the Western world, in the United States especially, it comes out in the proclamation, and it's still open to some discussion, but it's normally just proclaimed that under our system of government, it is ruled by law and not by man, which is a way of saying it is the institution of the crown and not the individual. That it's the office of the president that has executive power, not the guy in there. It's the office, which in legal circles and philosophical circles, you can say, yeah. If you take a guy in the street and you tell him that, the real truth is his brain is going to go, he might try to nod along like, well, I understand that, but his brain's going to go tilt, tilt, tilt. Like, what the hell does that mean? Anything? If it means anything, it doesn't mean anything. But it is the same kind of reflection in a slightly different manner that I am talking about the legal fiction of a corporation. But people have, life has made men discuss this on an individual level and then on mass levels. It is a part of the continuing historical discussion over the nature of the state or how people should be ruled. And it has, all right, I'll go ahead and hint, it has possible significance individually. And I'm not sure I can point out how anymore, but I just feel like it does. I'm just sure of it. If you get any glimpse of that, then let me ask you to ponder on your own. Is the power that seems to be you, is it actually you individually, or is it the institution of you, the crown, the throne? Oh, all right. May I suggest to you that everyone, in the same way that everyone is a corporation, I suggest to you also that everyone is the beneficiary, take that seriously or otherwise, but everyone is the recipient of the institution of the crown. You can't escape it. Everyone is. Now I'm asking you, you personally, does it seem to you that the power that seems to be you, that seems to be the continuing power that exercises some control, some thought, some decision in your life, does it seem to arise from the office of the president, that is, from the institution of the crown, or does it seem to actually, in the midst of that kind of theory, in the midst of it, does it seem to actually flow from an individual, the man, the woman, sitting in the office of the president, occupying the throne? That is, inside, is there, forget all this other discussion, is there a me? I mean a me that's in there, a me that's a king, a me that's a ruler, a me that is in control. I can further suggest to you, I was going to let you ponder it on your own, I can suggest to you that there is easily two answers to that in the same way, two usable answers in the same way that light is either particles or waves. The application of either of the theories based upon the immediate need. In the same way that you can believe that other people are responsible, that their individuality is responsible, that the corporation actually exists, when they back into you. When you back into them, the corporation of individuality is a legal fiction. It's useful in some cases, like if you backed into me. But in this case, it's simply not true. It is not true. I could bite my tongue. They can drive nails under my fingernails. And it's simply not true because I did not intentionally back into that man. I did not. So in some way, it's out of my control. I don't know what happened. Well, history, that is life's memory of failures, are artifacts of that which is no longer useful. Even history continues to ponder such questions as, still based upon, is the real power, is the legitimate power, is the way that life is best arranged to control people, for people to control their own destinies? Is it best that the attitude be that the power, the direction, the domination of some group of people comes from an institution of the throne or an office of a president, or from the individual? Now, still in regards to that, history ponders such questions as this and keeps rechewing them up, and philosophers keep coming along, and critics and historians, and trying to make new names for themselves over the fact of, how about during periods circa 1650 to 1670 in such area of the world, we had King so-and-so known as Mad King so-and-so. You remember the guy that used to go out and talk to the guppies out in his stream, and he'd go out there and seek. He claimed that was his secret cabinet, and that his ministers were the guppies. What happened to that country? What happened to that state during that period of time? And you'll have people try to describe it for a while that may be the dominant theory, the dominant view of history, that may say, well, look, the man was mad as a disco DJ. An out-of-work politician. But look, the nation survived, and some historian will even point out, indeed, certain areas of the arts, the sciences flourished. And so the power is really in the institution of power, that is, the institution of the crown, because periodically a stable nation, state, can absorb being led titularly by a madman. A few years later, a new a new historian comes along, has to make a reputation, say this last theory is the prevailing one about some particular epoch in history, and so a generation later, one of his students comes along and says, nay, 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 you need to fix out the same example or another one somewhere else, and says that's not true because look over here, I've got two great examples wherein these people are going along fine, being ruled. Good setup, either a parliamentary with a president or a prime minister, or a monarchy with a throne, with a crown being an institution. And suddenly, good old inbreeding shows up, and one of these horse-faced leaders turns mad, and the whole country falls apart. And it didn't matter that they had a reasonably stable peerage, that he had good advisors, that the court stayed fairly sane. In fact, they recognized, we got historical proof that they recognized the man was an idiot, was just completely mad. And yet, he single-handedly, and they began to show examples about how things digressed in all cultural and scientific, technological, political aspects. Either one is true. Either one can be true, either one are true. It's a real shame that there might not be any possible individual use for this information, that you could not take this view, this unnatural view, that is, this more complex view of life out there, and see that in any way might touch life in here, if there is a life in here. Another one I hit on several nights ago that might be opportune to bring back up. You recall that I said that If you're not totally in charge, you're not in charge at all. Well, let me tell you, inside the state, you've got to find a place. You've got to find and discover a place wherein you can be totally in charge. A place. Because if you don't, you'll never be in charge at all. Now, by a place, I sure wanted to leave it there, but evidently I better not. All right, at least one place. You've got to find a spot that either the institution of you individually, the crown, you the crown, or you the king. One spot, no matter how mad, no matter how deranged, or no matter how weak may be your institution of the monarchy, of the crown. You got to find one place that you can be totally in charge. All right, I'll hint further. You got one. All right, I'll hint further. You got one, or you don't belong fooling with us. All right? You got one. And you've got to find it, and you've got to be totally in charge in that one spot, or you'll never be in charge at all. Never. You got to find the place. And pull in another piece. Remember, I was talking about entertainment, that you could look at all secondary activities, not in any pejorative or flippant sense, but as entertainment, insofar as they are not absolutely required instantly for the basic physical, animalistic survival of you as a person. There are aspects of this that you should be able to find some use for. Out in life, what seems to be fads and fashions are an unrecognized, continuing, periodic allowance of life to let ordinary people, that is, secondary driven people, have a temporary taste of some improvisation in their entertainment. Was that a sentence to remember? Was that a sentence to paint on the side of your boat so that you remember where you were? One interesting aspect that I want to mention. Fads. Here we are. Let me think of one that we all know. This one's getting a little thin, but let's consider the latter part of 1988 and into 1989. If you notice, many automobiles have little stuffed cats with little section feet stuck on the car. And surely most of you remember, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago, you saw the first one. Now, it seems like, what, 2 out of every 5 cars has one of some nature? Fads. Remember what I started telling you, fads and fashion is like a small temporary taste that life continually allows to pop out, wherein secondary driven people get this sensation of some improv. But the interesting thing I was going to point out to you, the fads quickly reach such a place that the fad becomes the norm. Almost. Now, a fad, by its very definition, is not going to affect everybody in society. Probably a lot of the so-called upper classes will never put little Garfield stuck on the back of their Rolls Royce. Not just them, there are all kinds of so-called artistic-driven people, all kinds of smart alecks in life that as soon as they spot a fad, they hate it. And so they wouldn't fool with it at all. So by its very nature, a fad's not going to touch everybody. But let us say, how about this? Let us we got a little college community out in X city, Iowa. And for some reason, guys being guys, people being people, but one guy, one weekend, after having a few, ties a brassiere onto his door handle onto his car. And he drives around like that during the weekend there on the campus and into the town. And by Monday or Tuesday, at least by next weekend, for God knows why. I'm not a psychologist. Jesus, give me. On the campus there, suddenly, maybe it starts out with just his fraternity, but within, maybe that happens by Wednesday, they're all doing it, but by the end of the week, all over the campus, people that are with it, or at least guys that are with it, have got a brassiere tied to their door handle. All of you probably have had some involvement with a fad, hula hoop or something, that you suddenly heard about it, and you just had to. You didn't know why. You can't justify it unless you were an idiot back then, and you might have tried, which is quite all right. I don't hold you responsible for being an idiot before you met me. But there was a kind of sense of adventure, of exhilaration to get a hula hoop, to try to do it and to find out you couldn't do it, or how do people do it? Or where do you get a little cat? God, does that thing, how does it stick on there? Where do you get that? In fact, he bought his in Tijuana. And you think, God, how far? Well, do I know about it down that way? I want one. There is a feeling of excitement over something that seems like that. Or you look, and so driving around the car in the campus, playing good music, good tapes on the radio in his car, windows down, he's drinking beer, him, the guys, and it just strikes you, flying around, and that brassiere flying through the breeze tied to his, who knows what it means? And suddenly you got to do it. Suddenly a whole bunch of people got to do it. There is nothing, I started to say there's nothing silly. There's nothing seriously silly about any fad. The people, what I meant by that, if you think that fads are some sort of mass delusion or that there's some sort of intellectual anomaly that strikes people with less brain cells left than you have, you're wrong. There is a real sense of excitement. There is a sense, the reality behind what I was describing to you verbally as improvisation necessary for real entertainment. But at the secondary level, that is ordinarily driven people, there is a sense of real adventure, of real fun, the first time you get a little Garfield to stick on. Or the first time you finally find, or you can't get a brassiere from anybody, and you rush downtown or to Kmart, you hope nobody's looking, you have to buy your own, and you tie it on, and you stop and get a beer, and you rush back to the campus so that you can just casually, you drive as fast as you can, make sure the brassiere's still tied on, you get right there at the edge of the campus where you might be seen, then you slow down. Then you lean back like it's the most casual thing in the world. And your little heart's beating, you're just having so much fun. But the specific place I was trying to drag your attention is how short-lived fads are, also by their definition, that they come and go. And it's not simply to say, well, playing with a hula hoop, how long can you do it? Or, the Garfield, people try to dismiss a fad if you describe a fad as something that seems to be exciting, and then people get over it. Now in the city, they could explain it some way. Well, that's what fads are. That's the definition. But no. Life continually, through these periodic episodes, allows secondarily driven people to taste what is a form of improvisation in their entertainment. But then, almost as quickly as it comes, which is what I'm telling you the secret behind even the dictionary's definition of a fad, almost as quickly as it comes, life takes it away. It completes a circle. But it gives people the opportunity, just ordinary people, the opportunity to feel this periodic kind of small rush, and then life closes it up. That it becomes almost as fast as it became popular, it becomes almost a cliche. That within several weeks, nobody on that campus would be seen with a brassiere tied on there, because it finally reached the point that the nerd fraternity, and then it got past that, the guys that not even members of fraternities, city guys that's not even in the college, guys working downtown are doing it. Jesus. Then who would be caught dead doing it? It's reaching the point now with the cats. I would assume by now that those little stuck-on cats, if I found a company that manufacturing them, my suggestion to you, didn't ask me, is do not invest in it. The sales, as they say, should be leveling out real smartly by now. And what is worse to an ordinary person than to be still participating in yesterday's fad? What's worse than somebody being wearing yesterday's fashion? For years I included fashion. Men have laughed and ridiculed, and some women have, the idea of fashion. There's a small handful of men every year claiming that this will be the dress for next year's woman, and that women rushing out and doing it, which they never did all that much, but anyway, the whole idea. And there'd be men sitting around, just ordinary men, but then there've been people writing books, sociologists, social critics, going, my God, what kind of blind lemmings or women that they'd put up with this? And that's the same kind of men that'd be tying brassieres on their But they go, how could women do that? Men, we're too smart for that. But the idea of changing fashion is a fad. It's the same thing. But I want you to see that there is a reality of life continuing to let pop out fads and fashion, and it gives a kind of temporary feeling of exhilaration. It gives ordinary, secondarily driven people, which is everybody except almost everybody. It gives a temporary taste of what would be a kind of improvisation in their field, at their level of entertainment. But almost as soon as life lets it out, and the exhilaration of getting your first Garfield to stick in the window, and it's real fun for a day or so, and people you know go, hey, God, that's cute. Where'd you get that? Well, I got mine, and I was in New York and got it. In other words, you can't get one. I got one. Then strangers, when you're getting gas, you're at the 7-Eleven, you'll see people, if they quit asking, at least you'll see people look and smile, and you feel good. You feel something. You're glad you got it. Then a few days, a few weeks, you look around, and the kind of people that you normally look down on have got them in their cars. Everybody's got one. Suddenly you pull in one night, and you look at it, and you rip it out and throw it in the garbage. The feeling of improvisation. The feeling of improvisation is gone. And of course it apparently, again, is exactly what a fad does, that it comes and it goes. But I'm telling you, behind everything, behind all these institutions, behind all of these transitory corporations, the movements, something else is going on. Look at the benefit, using my sad to say, sad to describe picture of everybody being in the slaughter queue. Look that life at least has the decency that periodically that there everybody stands, and periodically the hula hoop comes through. Little Garfield stickies, mini dresses come back. A little something. What the hell? But notice, and they accept fads and fashion by the dictionary. I didn't look it up, but a fad is something that is transitory. And nobody thinks anything about it. They think, well, that's the definition of the word. That's what it means. But nobody thinks, well, what's the purpose of fads? I'm sure that there's been some psychologist or sociologist somewhere that's written a paper on it, might have got his doctorate in it. But nobody knows, because nobody's intellect is wired up to go past human behavior. Oh, they think they go past it, such as, is there any chance that genetics makes some people do what they do, like be more inclined to play with faddish things like a hula hoop? Or is it more the environment, since you don't see many of the Rockefeller children playing with hula hoops? They think they're going that far, but that's still not any further than the human. Well, and don't tell me, some of you, that religious people try to go further. They say, yes, we go past that, we go to God. But then you say, well, describe this to me, and they describe themselves. So, now what I'm describing are the activities of the hidden owners of this legal fiction known as the corporation of humans, individually and collectively. on that basis, it sends out energy that seems to be entertaining, that seems to be distracting, that seems to be exhilarating, thrilling for people, and almost as quickly it turns it into a verboten activity that who with any taste, with any joie de vivre, with any sophistication would be caught with one of those little sticky animals in your window. And of course you were one of the first ones to get it. It's no attack on your personality traits. It is the nature of life continuing to like that little burst of energy. And it's just enough that people get all excited, and they even put up a name for it. As I said, they call it a fad. Isn't this fun? And then it's gone almost as quickly. And then it's like everybody stands around and wonders, what will be the next fad? Next year, you think St. Laurent will drop the hem length again? I heard he might. Or will he keep it up? Shouldn't encourage anybody in any sort of makeshift, solitary attitudes, but I could point out, as always, life, some other part of life's body, manifests, not understands, but manifests a resistance to this. I was sort of describing when I started, hermits. All the way from hermits, absolutely people that just go civilization in its entirety. People in the city are nuts. I'm leaving. All the way from that to those who would stand around and even observe fads, whether it be something physically describable such as the hula hoop, or whether it seems to be a change in some group or some state or some culture's attitude, politically, religiously, economically. That there are people wired up by life's body to look in their lifetime at things that seem to change too drastically, and they adjudicate them to be a fad. And they're wired up on the basis that anything that the masses, the majority seems to believe, I disapprove of. You don't have to raise your hands, but I would suggest that there are some who fit that description right in this room, looking at this tape, wherever it may be. It would not be unexpected at all to find such people here. That just, you're wired up that just to give a blanket, whether you do it verbally or whether it seems to ruin your whole life, but there is a kind of a blanket resistance on your part of anything that seems to be new and faddish. As soon as somebody you hear on the TV, maybe not one of your friends, but as soon as the TV is apparently trying to sell you something, either a product, a theory, a political scenario, that here's the brand new thing that everybody is in favor of, get in on the bandwagon now. There are many people wired up that whatever the bandwagon is, you don't even have to hear anymore. I ain't getting on it. Okay. If indeed this is the brand new thing going all around, I ain't going around in it. I just point that out to show you that even life laying out these little bursts of energy, there are people who say, I don't want any burst of energy. I don't even want to hear about it because I don't like it. Don't tell me the details. I am not going to play. Just to show you again that life does not totally do anything that you can observe. Well, of course, other than kill people, you can observe that. And poor dinosaurs and pterodactyls. I want to use, hit a question that somebody, I told you, was a good one that somebody picked out of the one-liners that we had read one night, a collection of them. I'm going to rephrase a little bit of it. I don't even think I got it. But the gist of it was that the person was taking the line that had to do with the self-evident assumption that seems to hold things together in the city. And the person, does everybody remember? I'm not going to repeat everything, but I was talking about that from ordinary intelligence's view, there are just self-evident truths. And I told you there were self-evident assumptions, but they're accepted as the kinds of truth and realities, and it's the kind of things that any group of people, a state, a tribe, that group has to have a kind of collective conversation, that there are self-evident assumptions that seem to hold them together. Their beliefs in a common God, as they call it. Their, by and large, beliefs in a certain political system. that they all accept, at least for the time being, for one generation's lifetime. Those kinds of things. The acceptance that, all right, turtle shells are the means of currency. They're kind of self-evident all the way from obvious, you might say, that we've got to have some means of coinage, to the abstract of, all right, we all worship the same God. Nobody knows who it is. They try to describe it and they all more or less nod, yeah, I agree. The person that wrote me the question, it went like this, more or less. They said, on the basis of me and them trying to pursue it on their own, of there being self-evident assumptions that hold groups of people together, societies together, should they, in their attempt to pursue it, look at these self-evident assumptions as being cultural or universal? And I'm assuming, I feel safe to say, that they meant, does it seem to be that which was produced by the group themselves life, or just something by that individual group, or something that seems to have a more of a total, that is universal, inescapable genesis? That wasn't all. The rest of the question was, as I attempt to unravel this, as I attempt to ponder this myself, should I look upon the differences in peoples, in groups of peoples? Should I attempt to be looking for the differences or the similarities? Now that was the part I really liked. We got to turn the tape over. The question, the part I was really going to respond to, not necessarily tell you why I liked it, because I've already told you why I liked it. I liked it because I liked it, or I wouldn't have used it. Should the person, as they attempt to ponder this matter and study the matter, should they attempt amongst groups of people to look for their similarities or their differences? That is a splendid question. Now you can forget, even for the time being, unless I go back to it, the apparent material basis, that is, of setting societies, or the question, which was really a separate question, of whether the self-evident assumptions that I referred to, would they be cultural, produced by that group, or are they universal? Even you can ignore that for a second. The question of, should studying anything, what seems to be two diverse things, ideas, people, groups, individuals, philosophies, should I attempt to be looking for similarities or dissimilarities? Well, let me give you a short version. This could even be a chi-root. It should have been. Here it is. Consider this a straightforward, dogmatic, unflinching chi-root. Except we'll bypass all that chi-root, and I'll just tell you. Everything's side by side, except those things that are connected on parallel tracks, and those things are so far apart that they now stand back to back. Hint number one: the short version is always the good version. to those who have long sight. The simple version is always the best for those of complex hearing. All right, perhaps a more mathematical one. On a plane, you could go in any direction. I said any direction, and I meant any direction, and eventually manage to fall off into a 3D world. All right? Those of a more complex intelligence, they could look for similarities in things that they were trying to study. And of course, there's always some basis to compare it with something, or you could not begin to study it. You would not even want to study it unless there was something to compare it with, such as, I don't know about this. That's the comparison. I would like to know about it. From a different view, from the view that I suggest is possible when you can get the brain operating above where it is now, may I be blunt? You could look for similarities. Let's assume similarities are in that direction. Or you could look for differences, which, let's see, I'll assume would be, well, let's pretend would be in that direction. And I suggest to you that it would not matter. So I'll repeat the short version. Everything is side by side. That sounds all right, I thought, to start with, which is my little trick that I like to lull people into. Terse but telling. But then, as you should know by now, I hardly, or Kairoot hardly ever speaks in such short sentences. So it's everything side by side, comma, except those things that are connected on parallel tracks, comma, and those things that are so far apart that they now stand back to back. I personally am satisfied that I have covered the acreage. That is it. But it is interesting that somebody asked in that manner, because it is a very fair, and it seems in the beginning to be a very useful question, and I could talk about it in different ways. If I was trying to compare, like, my behavior to somebody else's behavior, if I was trying to compare the idea of, does man have any free will at all? Is there any sort of cultural basis for the behavior of people? If not, as opposed to it just being a universal, genetically driven mode of action that affects everybody, then if that's true, then, oh, wait a minute. If there is no basis, if there is no difference, and it's not in some way cultural, that is, it's man's own action doing it, then why is it that morality differs from place to place? Why is it that one group worships God and another group worships Allah, and someone over here says that his name is somebody else? There's such varying manifestations of human behavior, cultural behavior, that how can we explain it? How can we say that they're universal? How can we say universal, almost being synonymous in this case with genetically driven? How can we say that? Because if that's true, then everybody would believe in the cultural aspects of humanity. Maybe everybody would not physically look alike, but the cultural aspects, the things that seem to hold groups together, would all be the same. Of course, now we have the intellect operating at its first class, 65 miles an hour where legally permitted. We got the intellect going that, all right, it's either got to be. When we talk about this area, it's either got to be that things, whatever it is that's producing man's culture, what's driving him, it's got to be universal norms, universal forces, or they have to be culturally produced themselves. That is, that men, once they're collected together, in some way they're producing circumstances, forces to cause these variations. So it's got to be one or the other. And of course then I might pop up and say, no, there's always a third possibility, and this is no exception. There's a third possibility. And here we go again. And people much more educated than I am would say it's either got to be that they're universal norms, forces, or they're individually as per the culture. It's got to be one or the other. What's the third possibility? And I say the third possibility is no. I'll go through it again. No what? No. No, you didn't hear me. I was using your own terms. I'm pointing out to you, based upon what you're saying, I'll accept the terms. The cultural manifestations, the cultures of any groups of people, are either produced by the culture itself, the living humans, and they're unique, or singular, all right, unique, to that group, or else they're universal. Now it's got to be one or the other. Now what's the third possibility? No, it don't. They might say, well, you're getting better. First you said no. So am I assuming that you now consider this to be an exposition on no, to say no it don't? And I could say, yeah. Should I compliment life again on the way things are arranged? Because really what I was going to point at is how neatly it's arranged. I've never done this. How neatly it's arranged inside this little activity once you can see it, which is not immune to the way the arrangements of everything else. Out there I keep pointing out to you how things are arranged where they can only be seen as this and that, or where it seems like things are going somewhere, like the circuitous situations in which people live seem to offer the immediate, continuing promise that you can wrap things up wherein just the opposite is true insofar as there exists an opposite at that level. You know, I oftentimes, as you know, I'll compliment life on those kinds of master strokes and plans, but inside this kind of activity is also beautiful little master strokes once you begin to see them, such as the third possibility, no matter what. Fill in the blanks. Any situation you come up with, that once you narrow down that you're talking about something and then some manifestation of something, several adjectives of this something or several adverbs of that verb, such as, all right, we're talking about an automobile. Got it. Now I'm talking about the automobile in regards to one thing, power steering. Now I'm talking about this culture. Now it has many manifestations. A car has power brakes, power windows, and the lack of same. We're talking about a culture. Culture has art, it has politics, it has morality, but I want to talk about one thing. I want to talk about the religious aspect, the belief in a specific God about this group. I want to talk about this car, and in this group, this culture, and I want to talk about one aspect of that, one adjective or one adverb. In the case of the car, I want to talk about one thing only. We'll get to the others another time if it's important. Talk about power steering vis-a-vis this car. Talk about this culture vis-a-vis the idea of one God by the name of Herman the Magnificent. The beautiful little arrangement in this that no one knows, that some of you laugh at now, that since I've been using it for a few weeks, is no matter what the example, talk about cars, talk about religion, talk about your apparent kinds of tension or if not confrontations with other humans, that in any situation you can, that here is the main thing we're talking about. We're either talking about the culture, talking about the car, but now let's talk about one aspect of it, power steering, religion. All right. It always comes down to this, that whatever you think about, and of course there are all kinds of things to think about, like the car. Last time I just used, all right, the car either has power steering or it doesn't. It could be other things. You could narrow it down even more, all right, is this power steering variable or non-variable? Does the power steering, will it affect overall maintenance cost? You can keep narrowing it down to where there always seems to be two things. That is, will it increase my overall maintenance cost or will it not? I can even make it more than that. Then I could say, well, before I answer that, how long do you plan to keep the car? The average that people do of 4.8 years or more than that. You can keep on, and it always comes down to, at least in this regard, we're talking about two possibilities. Either the car with power steering or the car without power steering. All right, let's talk about the car with power steering. If you got the car with power steering, is it going to increase your overall maintenance cost during the time you own the car, or will it not? Two possibilities. Well, wait a minute, let's go further than that. All right, let's assume that it will. I mean, the question is whether it will increase your overall maintenance cost. Then the question is, are you going to keep the car 5 years or less, or 5 years or more? All right, so we got two possibilities. It doesn't matter what it is, or whether you're talking about the culture over here in God. The little beauty inside of this that life allows is, it doesn't matter what it is, until you can have it happen to you to where it becomes more native to your intellect. You can always start with what I've been saying to you, whatever the question is about, all right, it's got to be either this or that. Your answer to that to yourself is always, no it don't. If you could do that, you can do that which nobody hardly on this planet can do at any given time. And it is not necessarily instant enlightenment or ignition of higher circuits, but it is useful. I wouldn't keep hanging on it to you. So whatever it is, all right, well, I've either got to do so-and-so or not do it. And I mean, I've got to decide here pretty quick. There's always a third possibility that, all right, I've either got to do this or not. No, I don't. But at the level that produced that talking through your corporate veil, your corporate spokesman says, wait a minute, All right, here I am. Now I've either got to do this right now, or in the next few minutes or hours. I've either got to do it. I've got to decide to do it, or just not do it. No, I don't. The thing, what drove you, what drove your circuits to say that, that thing is not in any manner, no matter who you are, wired up to deal with the more correct, more complex response of, no, I don't. Or wait a minute. All right. Now I've got to decide this. Now it's either this or that. I mean, there's no choice. At that level, all right? You either get the car with power steering or without. There is no other possibility living in a plane. No matter where you go, you reach the edge of the table. And if that's as far as you can go, two edges of the table over here says car with power steering, and two over here, let's say, without power steering. And for me to say that the answer is verbally, which is a form of the intellect speaking, if you start using this kind of verbalization yourself, is seeking to push the limits of its own language, of its own life. It's to say, no, it don't. That is, I only got two possibilities. No, you don't. I've either got to do this or that. No, you don't. All right. What I think, what I believe in this matter, what's true is either got to be this or that. At that level, that's true. That's the only way that the intellect, at the level at which it is operating in everybody now, that's the only way it can operate. It's the only way. 2 and 2 is either got to be 4 or not 4. That's it. I can't muck about with that, nor would I. Nobody can. It's got to be that way. If the air conditioner is actually an air conditioner, when you turn it on, things get cooler. That's it. It's got to be that way. But if you're ever going to escape from that, you have got to see, and you can start using it in a real way. It is a kind of chemical and electrical shock into your own nervous system that there you are, that I've got to either do this or that. That's the only, I mean, that's it. You can look as hard as you want to. You can go think real hard. And that's it. You can always say. It's one of the few times, at least if you want to, remember my pleasant voice and my idea, my verbalization, is that no, it is not two possibilities. There's always a third. And you don't have to look for what the third is. The third is always this. You've got to change around and make the sentence make sense if you're that concerned about your grammar. The third possibility is always, no, it's not. Or no, I don't. That is the more complex response to anything, which is everything in the city, that is presented in a dualistic manner. That, all right, here I am. I got these two choices. I got to do one or the other. The answer is no, you don't. Here I've got two possibilities. One has to be true and the other false. No, it don't. There's only two possible ways to act here. No, there's not. That's it. That is the immediate, correct, more complex response verbally to what your own nervous system is being made to say. It's what the institution of your own crown, the office of your own president, that is built in as part of the Constitution. That is part of the at least common law governing activities of your institution of the crown. That, well, the only decent thing that we can do to the people is this or that. No, it's not. We're running out of tape. I had one more I wanted to mention. It was a question. I'm not really going to bother to read it. But here's what's interesting. It was a chi root, one of the ones from the one. And the chi root, I can remember based upon what they said. And the chi root itself was like 8 or 10 words. Trust me. Real direct, and went da-da-da-da-da, went da-da-da-da, that certain things can only happen when da-da-da-da-da, when some other things happen. It was a nice short song, the da-da-da-da-da, the da-da-da-da-da, that only so-and-so can happen when such and such is true. Somebody got it absolutely by leaving out one word, which was not, got it absolutely in all verbal city, three-dimensional sense, bass-ackwards. Absolutely the opposite of what was said, but yet no, they still found it so interesting. Think about it. It's not an attack on the person. They found it so interesting of hearing just the opposite that they wrote and wanted me to speak on it some more. Think about it. Think about, well, I'm going to look, find out and study life. Let's see, I'll look in this direction. That is, would you comment on when you said da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da? Like, if you want to see something, just look over here. Except what they heard was da-da-da-da-da-da, look over here. And they were equally as interested. Nobody else wrote about that one. Nobody else wrote and had it either right or wrong. But one person found it so interesting and had it absolutely backwards by leaving out one word. They heard that instead of it saying, you know, if it rains, you should not go outside. What they heard was, every time it rains, go outside. Of course, it was not quite that simple. It was more metaphorical and etc. And it had more innuendos of a complex nature, but by having it exactly backwards did not change the fact that they were interested enough to please say more about this. Now don't just laugh at that. That wasn't the point, to make fun of that. Think about what goes on in everybody. But think, everybody's wired up to believe, those that are functioning fairly stably, that is continually being driven by the higher end of the nervous system, that having your facts straight, having good information, sound data is important. Is it? Is it? You know, I told you the other night, I pointed out to you, just you can write this down in blood, that everybody's silly. Would you believe that all information is silly? Also, you remember I said that everybody's silly. That wasn't all of it, you remember, especially those who don't think they are. All information is silly. Especially that information that cries out, no, we're not. We're the kind of information that you will ignore or get wrong at your peril, right? I don't know. Let's think about that over the weekend until we meet again. What?